Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Good evening. All right. Brenda, it looks like we're well over quorum.
Yes.
All right. Why don't we get started? Good evening, everybody. I will call this meeting, the December Water Board meeting, to order. Brenda, if you would take roll for us, please.
Okay, Board Member Birsky,
Present.
Board Member Mercier, Board Member Ridley,
Present.
Board Member Roth,
Present.
Board Member Freeman, Council Member Anderson, Council Member Woodward,
Present.
Mayor Sierra,
Present.
Vice Chair Habenik,
Present.
Chair Moore.
Present. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is just approval of the minutes from the November 8th board meeting. Could I get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
Wonderful. Any discussion, corrections? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Last I heard, we did not have a public forum, but Brenda, just check one more time.
Yeah, we do not have any public quorum.
Okay, great. So taking us to our one new business item for the evening, 2023 bulk chemical purchases. And Josh, I'll hand it over to you.
Actually, if I can step in before you hand it over to Josh, I just want to take a moment to introduce Josh Roach to the board. Josh has been with us for about 1.5 years, and just last month successfully interviewed and is now our permanent Deputy Director of Operations and Maintenance. And he was in that role as an interim since July, has done an exceedingly good job. And now we have that permanently filled, which has really helped us round out our staffing. Our last vacancy is the Deputy Director of Engineering, which we're still recruiting for, but I'm really excited to have Josh in this role. He's got years and years of experience in operations and maintenance of water, and he's brought a tremendous amount of that experience to Englewood Water, which has been great. So if with that, I'm gonna, Josh, let you run with it, and thank you, Chair, for letting me provide an introduction there.
Oh yeah, of course, and congratulations, Josh. And of course, now the pressure's on.
Right, thank you. Good evening, Chair and Board. I think Sarah's going to share with us the screen here. I'm here to present the 2023 bulk chemical purchases for the Allen Water Treatment Plant. These are the same chemicals we purchase every year and probably presented to you the previous year. These are bulk chemicals for the plant. These are kind of the core chemicals that we use for disinfection, pH adjustment, and sediment removal in the form of sodium hypochlorite, sodium hydroxide, and aluminum sulfate. The cost for that, the screen is a little blocked on mine, but the cost of that is $380,000 for sodium hypochlorite, and that is through DPC Industries, and $175,000 for the sodium hydroxide, also through DPC Industries, and then aluminum sulfate through Chemtraded Chemicals, $195,000 for a total of $750,000. All these are competitively bid and run through processes through an organization called APO, which is a kind of a joint city procurement opportunity there for stuff to be competitively bid without us necessarily having to do all that work. So these are the chemicals presented last year. We got the same ones up this year for a total of $750,000. With that, is there any questions?
Yeah. Any questions for Josh? Not seeing any. Josh, I'm just curious, how more of the unit cost or whatever? Just kind of curious what kind of inflation we're seeing on these chemicals
Yeah.
for a given quantity relative to last year?
Right. So we are ordering the same amount as we did last year with an increase of about 30%. So
Ooh.
pretty significant and substantial increase from previous year. But that's just stuff we see across the board with lots of items.
Yeah. Drevis, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I had heard somewhere, and I wish I wrote it down when I heard it, that there were supply chain issues now with the water treatment supplies. Did you see any of that, or is that why the 30% increase is in there?
I can't speak to if that's why the 30% increase is in there, but we see supply chain issues with a lot of things. So because of that, we're responding with getting some bulk orders.
Right.
We're getting lots of backup supplies and stuff. So we are preparing for that in ways all across the plant because we're seeing those kind of supply chain disruptions ever since COVID started.
Okay.
And I'll just add to that. One of the things that was a concern was the railway strike. That was actually a significant thing that we were paying attention to because that was potentially going to create an issue for chemicals for water plants and same thing in a wastewater plant. Fortunately, that seems to be resolved at the federal level, so we don't anticipate that creating a supply chain disruption. And I'll just add that these chemical increases, we're seeing very similar increases over at the wastewater plant as well. It's just really the impacts of inflation on these types of commodities.
I'm not seeing any additional questions. Oh, and actually, Josh, we pulled down the PowerPoint so we can shift to this. Thank you. Jim, I saw your hand was up. Did you have a hand raised? I'm sorry, you're muted. I assume you're good. All right. I'm assuming, Jim, you don't have anything, or you're muted, so I can't hear, but we'll move on. Can I get a motion to recommend the
John?
city council? Oh, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, right when I was trying to hit the unmute button, another screen popped up on my computer telling something. My question was, I said, in the letter, there's to Kimberly, the first email I think that shows up, it asks if the city of Inglewood was not part of the last MAPO bid. What is an MAPO? And is that to our advantage or disadvantage?
Yes, the MAPO have that acronym right here, but what it is a joint organization. It's actually the Colorado Multiple Assembly of Procurement Officials. So because this stuff's ordered through lots of cities and lots of utilities, they kind of work together to get the best pricing on these things. So we did use that pricing for this year and the previous year as well. As of 2020, I'm not certain if we were part of the organization then.
And I can actually add some background on that. There was a point in time where we were not actually part of the MAPO contract, and we were being afforded MAPO pricing, and we did resolve that to now be part of that MAPO pricing, is my understanding. So these are all based on that cooperative pricing approach that gets us the best rates for these types of commodities.
Okay, so we are getting the best rates that we can. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, then can I get a motion to recommend that City Council approve by resolution Water and Sewer Board agenda items 5A1 and 2 as written?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. We have no old business, and we'll go to staff's choice.
Okay, I have a few items here. Thank you, Chair. The first of which is something that occurred in September of this year that we've been working through the effects of, which is we are now considered a large utility. So what that means is it changes how we are regulated to a certain degree. And essentially what happened is the city didn't, or the state did an assessment of us. And what they look at is, you can see they look at not just our population that lives here, but our influx of population that works here. So because we have industry and because we have the hospitals, they're a couple of our biggest employers, we serve not just the permanent residents water, but all the people that come into the city on a regular basis are considered consumers of the water, which then creates the total that they go off of. So if you look at the table, our residential population is about well, it's not even estimated, it's 33,659. So that seems pretty precise, but it's right around where we would expect it to be, which is right around that 33 to 35,000. The non-transient, so this is the group that comes and goes to work is estimated at 23,673. These are based on actual data that's pulled by, I think it's the Census Bureau. It's based on the census that determines these numbers, which then gives us a total population of 57,332 served by the utility. The point of large utility designation is anything over 50,000 people. So we had been working with the state through the course of the spring and the summer to provide them information. We thought we were slightly under the 50,000, but then they provided us the data that when we went back and confirmed based on that, it was that non-transient number. That really is what pushes us over that 50,000. So what does it all mean? It means we are much more regulated as it relates to lead and copper. And we already had have a program in place to address our lead service lines. We were already getting ahead of that in anticipation of this designation. Well, this puts us into a place where we're no longer voluntarily moving forward to stay ahead of that. We actually have regulatory requirements that are associated with being a large utility designation. And so you can see some of the things that are listed there. The other thing that it does is it increases our sampling rates that we need to pull samples for. So this is something that, you know, the sampling rate increase is an impact, but it's not a tremendously significant impact. The lead and copper rule is an impact in the sense that we go from voluntarily addressing our lead service line issue to now we have expectations from a regulatory perspective on a schedule for addressing those lead service lines. We are still planning to address them more aggressively than what's required by the regulation, because we think it's something that we've gotten the funding in place, a lot of the funding in place. We're securing funding through the infrastructure bill to also help complete that funding for the removal of those lead service lines. And once that funding's in place, we would like to remove them as fast as possible to eliminate the risk to the system. What this also means is we have to do something that's called an optimal corrosion control study. This is what Denver Water did over the last few years. If you've heard about the Denver Water corrosion study and the program to deal with their lead service lines. So a couple of the things that came out, key points that came out of that was everybody that has a lead service line was sent a Brita filter with a filter that filters the water. Denver Water went through extensive testing to determine the effects of that filtration as it relates to the removal of lead, and this was deemed a pilot. It has been subsequently fully approved by the EPA just in the last couple of weeks. There was a media announcement on it that came out that said that the Denver water model for dealing with this type of issue should be used by more communities across the US. So we are looking to model that approach because they've gone through the work of getting the state to approve it. And it puts us in a place where we can do a similar type of mitigation in the short term. And then the other piece of it is accelerating the removal of the lead service lines, which we had planned to do all along from a strategy. This is now just makes it required. So there's going to be more coming on this. We anticipate more directives. We'll be working with the state to get approval on that approach. And we'll be working with outreach, our community outreach, so that people understand when they get sent a Brita filter, there's a rationale and a reason why. So just another impact from a regulatory perspective that we've been anticipating and now we're dealing with. Any questions? A few.
Travis and then Ty.
Yes, I was here when they didn't get all the required, I guess, tests done or backflow, whatever that was done. And then they had something where it came up that they had to call for the boil order. And I'm just wondering if we have a process in place this time to have the appropriate people call for the boil order and then reverse it if we're doing it by phone or cell phone and notifying people and then just leaving it hanging out there. If we have that better under control as a backup.
So here's so this is somewhat of a different issue, but it is a regulatory issue. But it's different than this lead and copper work that we need to focus on here. I think the issue with the boil order was associated, like what we ultimately determined is we had what we believe was a leaking meter pit, and out of a tremendous abundance of caution and protection of the health of the community, we went with that approach to address it. And then there was the over notification issue that was determined to be an issue with the system. And what it was is there was a programming value in that system that basically said that the bleed over for that polygon square of notification was originally intended to be 0.1 miles. And because they use that system a lot in rural areas for wildfire notification, they had switched that programming to 10 miles. And so when Arapahoe County issued that I forgot what the system is, it's escaping me right now, but that alert where there was an anticipation it was only going to go 1/10 of a mile outside the border of Englewood, it went 10 miles. Right. So that has been addressed as it relates to how that system notifies. Yeah. The backflow, also a different issue, another regulatory issue that we have essentially, and this is a credit to Josh and his staff, we did in 9 months what other cities did in 5 years to plan for that program. So we didn't have any of the mechanisms in place. There were no systems in place. And we ended up with that violation and essentially went from a paper copy program to now we have a program where we're in compliance this year. We're at our compliance numbers for this year. And we did that in 9 months, which is pretty unheard of in terms of responding to an issue. And a lot of credit goes to Josh and his staff. He did that right after coming on board. That was one of the main things we had him focus on. So both of those issues, while they're slightly different, we think we've addressed and mitigated to the degree that we can, and ideally, we're not facing another one of those types of issues anytime in the distant future. Does that help?
It helps. I just would like there to be somebody in the water department that would be assigned to push the panic button and then release it instead of having it just go on for days and days and having, I mean, I got tons of phone calls because people weren't sure if it was over or not. And I thought, well, I don't understand why they didn't just reverse that 911 and tell everybody you're okay, all's clear. Most institutions do that. So it was a weird situation, I know, but I just felt like there should be a point person and they should have the authority to reverse that instead of letting somebody who's not assigned to do it just let it wait out.
Yeah, this is where we rely on the county for those types of services, and the county, we asked the county to provide that reverse notification, but because of the significant issue associated with the initial notification, they were reluctant to issue another one because they didn't know why the system wasn't working properly. So they told us, we don't want to send another one out because we don't understand why it went to as many people as it did, and we don't want to cause another round of metro-wide questioning around that. So that was the issue specific to that. In a future circumstance, I would hope that we'd get a little more cooperation on that, but I think there's a significant push from city staff, and the county just wouldn't do it.
Yeah, that's
Peter,
unfortunate. Okay.
Peter, didn't we have someone come and join one of our meetings and allow us to express our concerns about it? Am I remembering that correctly?
We did, yeah, and that's the emergency manager for Arapahoe County, who works specifically with Englewood. He subsequently has left the county, and there's a new gentleman that is in that role, and he's been there for, I believe, I want to say about 5 or 6 months. Came from California. He's met with us at the city a few times, but so we did have someone come in, and I believe there were a number of pointed questions that were addressed to him about that exact issue.
Yeah, that's what I remember. All right, Ty.
Hey, Peter, are you anticipating any major budgetary shifts or human resource changes with the new burden of the reclassification?
So I think it's something we've been planning for. So when we originally put together the financial plans and the master plans and the financial plans, we left lead service lines as an unfunded program because if we funded it, it drove the rates up way too high in 2020 to the point where we didn't think it was something that was that would have made it through approval. And so what we did is we left it out there with the idea that we're going to find other sources for funding that. So the WIFIA program is one of those points of funding. And then, so that provides 19 million towards this program. And then in the meantime, the infrastructure bill passed, and we have just in the last few weeks have been invited. We got our LOI approved, and we've been invited to apply for $70 million of infrastructure bill money, which is split 52% low interest loan, 48% grant. And so that's so if you think about $70 million, that's about $34 million of grant funding to help address our lead service line. So we think overall from that strategy of parking it off to the side and realizing we need to figure out how to fund it differently has actually worked out. And you know, we were fortunate in the fact that there was an infrastructure bill that has targeted lead service lines. As it relates to staffing, we don't have the in-house capability to run this program. And so we have an RFP that's going to release, I believe, in the next week or two for a program manager. And so what that is a outside consulting firm to essentially run this as a turnkey program they will have a project manager that coordinates with one of our project managers. But as it relates to all aspects of executing the lead service line replacement program, that will be a contracted out program for probably the next 5 to 7 years.
Thanks.
All right, not seeing further questions. So Peter, floor is still yours.
Okay, up next, it must be the regulatory month for discussing things. We have another regulatory pressure that's affecting us, which is PFAS. I know we've talked about this a little bit. We have been working with the state in terms of what our notification requirements are going to be around PFAS. So these are forever chemicals. This is the stuff that's in Teflon and firefighting foam and Gore-Tex and food packaging and all those kinds of issues. And the target from a regulatory perspective is on the water system, because the water system is an easy place to target removing PFAS. Well, the first step is understanding where we have PFAS. So we just got new testing data back, and our numbers are lower than they were a few years ago when we tested. However, we still have low levels of PFAS that exceed the advisory or the guidance level, the health advisory level. So it's not a regulatory level; it's a health advisory level, which is what the EPA came out with this summer. So what it's going to entail is we are going to have to provide a public notice to all of our customers. We are working with the state right now as it relates to what that's going to look like and what kind of information we have to send out. A number of other utilities have already done this, like Denver Water has done this, Aurora Water has done this. So we are working with them to get consistent messaging. And it's something that we'll likely need to do in the next 30 to 45 days. I was just talking to Josh about this afternoon, and what I asked him to do was see if we could get the state to allow us to send it in February. And the reason why is because we have a study session at council right now on the large utility designation. And so what I wanted to do was provide an update on this as well in advance of every customer being notified about the fact that there's PFAS in the water. So we're trying to work through that. We don't know if they're going to give us that timing, but we're hopeful that they will, because it'll make it easier for us from a notification process. We'll pull that information together once we get that final table of what those results are, and that will be part of that communication. But I think overall, with these two issues, what it's really highlighting is the regulatory landscape is becoming more and more difficult for not just us as a water provider, but at South Platte Renew, we're dealing with the same regulatory landscape issues around PFAS. It affects our discharge amount, and it also the water levels in the water discharge, but it also affects our biosolids significantly, which we're concerned about. So this is one of those issues that is creating a lot of challenge across the U.S. that we have now been officially notified by the state that we're going to have to make a public notification on.
All right. Marjan, you have your hand raised?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Hi, Peter. Thank you for taking my question. I was wondering, so once you notify the public about this situation, what are the recommendations? I personally haven't done huge research on PFAS, but do they have receptors? Does our skin has receptors for this? Or because I'm thinking if people are like, let's say they need to get filters and then they put it on their drinking water, and so they can eliminate that. Do they bypass our skin barrier? Do they have receptors? Do they need receptors on the skin? Do you know anything about that?
So the number one way that people are exposed to PFAS is through food, actually. And the second most common way is through water. So if you have like a pizza box that, doesn't absorb grease, that's likely because there's a certain amount of PFAS on that. And so that PFAS is something that affects food. So it is actually much more prevalent in the food we consume than it is in the water. But to try and regulate it through try and regulate it and remove it through food approaches is harder. It's easier from a water perspective because there's a filtration point and there can be a requirement to put in some kind of filtration. So as it stands right now, the levels that we have are typically higher than what we all have in our blood systems right now, based on just normal exposure. And the health advisory number is specific to certain segments of the population. So pregnant women is one of the health advisory numbers, and the number is extremely low. It's I think it's 4 parts per quadrillion. And I think I have an analogy for that. It's like 4 drops in 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. It's a significantly small number, but it's what they've determined as the health advisory number at the EPA. There are a number of us that work with the state. We just had a call a couple of weeks ago to work with we were working actually with the state. We had a presentation from the state toxicologist around PFAS. And we're struggling as water providers because in one sense, we want to make sure that people don't lose confidence in the public water system. And on the other sense, you've got a federal regulatory approach that is driving down the exposure limit to essentially the levels of non-detect. And so we're watching how this regulatory landscape plays out over the next several months. They're in the process of forming regulations on this. We are actively part of that. But this is going to be something that every water provider has to deal with over the next several years. So it's really that those high risk groups, which is pregnant women and I think it's immunocompromised, or there's a list and it's in the health advisory.
So I guess my question is, if you warn the customers, the residents of this, is there a solution attached to that, or is the solution is everybody go buy your filtered water?
Yeah, great question. And I think that's a lot of what a number of water providers are struggling with, because right now we don't know what the solution is. We don't know what the right solution is. And this, if we're told to implement a solution, this could be a very expensive solution. And so I've said this on this SPR side as well. All the financial models do not account for PFAS or any amount of regulatorily driven capital investments that are required to address it. So anything that comes down the PFAS road in terms of requirements, we are going to have to modify all of our financial plans in both organizations. So as it relates to what do you do, it really comes down to, personal choice of what, acceptable risk. And again, it's not a regulatory number. It's a health advisory number right now. We expect a regulatory number to be coming out in the next year that's probably similar. But part of the challenge with the testing levels being that low is that there's a number of these. So bottled water doesn't necessarily test to prove out that they don't have it. And then you also then you deal with the issue of microplastics. And so which one do you want to trade for? Do you want a small amount of this or a small amount of that? So it's a challenge from a messaging perspective for exactly what you're pointing out.
I appreciate that. And I do see that dilemma that you have and the problem that you have in your hand as well. It's not an easy solution. I appreciate your explanation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that's coming.
Don't see any other questions. So anything more, Peter?
Just the look ahead schedule, you can see what we have coming up for the next few months. Just if there were any questions on that. But it's all pretty standard stuff. I think that, we're continuing to execute on the plans and hire the right contractors to get the programs in place and get some of these programs up and running.
Good.
So that I had just one other quick comment that I just wanted to make about where we are. This year has been a growth year, I would say, for this utility. We have filled out a significant amount of the staffing requirements and staffing structure that we've identified over the past couple of years. And I really feel like we're in this transitionary place where we've brought in a number of people with high levels of expertise. We've got contracts in place. We've got plans in place. We're in designs, moving into construction. And I really feel like we're poised for 2023 to really move into the future in a way that is not so reactive, but is much more proactive in how we're addressing this utility. And I want to thank the board for sticking with us through this. It has been a challenging 2.5 years since March of 2020 when I started. But your support has been tremendous. And even through some of those, through those violations and through those issues that we're having, I think we're getting there. We're getting to the point where we're turning a corner, and the future is looking brighter. So I want to express my thanks to the board since we're at the end of the year, and really just I'm optimistic about where we're headed into the future as a utility. Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Wonderful. Anything from the board before we wrap up for the evening in the year? Marjan?
I just personally wanted to thank Peter for spending the time educating me on one-on-one level of understanding how the water system, so I don't take the board's time. And I want to thank you, Peter, for everything you do. It's just, I have much more clarity. I'm so thankful for your presence with it and everything you do beyond and your expertise and care. I want to thank you from my personal and for everybody else that may not be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I feel like those have been very effective meetings.
Thank you.
Travis?
Going back to the numbers from 1991 to 2022 on becoming a large utility.
Yes.
Does that impact then the amount of water that you have planned for the city growth? Does that change that number then from, I think you could go up to the 50 or 55,000 and be fine? It's factored in. It's baked into the per capita number that we use. And so the per capita is looking across the users of the system. So if someone's coming into the hospital is using a certain amount of water to serve that population that's coming in from outside to use it. That is in our per capita numbers. So it does not affect it in that respect. It is incorporated into those numbers. Okay, so that doesn't mean we have to put a cap on all of these big, huge buildings going up or anything like that?
No, and I would say our planning shows that we've still got a lot of cushion in our water rights portfolio right now as it stands. That could change, but right now we anticipate that somewhere around 55,000 is where we start to probably hit the limit. And I think as I may have mentioned, that it's not a year-round limit, that we have a period of time in the fall, which is really when the water supply challenge occurs for most utilities, because you've gotten through the dry summer, but you haven't got the winter snow and runoff. And so it's in that time period that we hit this point where we get past 55,000 from a population number, and it becomes a challenge. But we think there's a fair amount of room right now based on the growth pattern for the city to accommodate it from a water perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions. All right, well, good. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody. This is it for the year. I hope everyone has a happy holiday, and we are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Happy holidays.
Yes, happy
You all.
holidays.
Thank you.
Be safe.
You as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.